I used to believe that family was unshakable, that blood, no matter how tainted or strained, bound people together in a way nothing else could. I used to repeat that to myself when I was younger, a mantra drilled into me by my mother every time the walls of our house trembled with shouting. We're family, and family forgives. That's what she would say as she pressed my head into her chest, muffling my sobs while my father stormed out the door. I was only 9 then, too young to understand that sometimes forgiveness is just another word for surrender. Now I'm 34 and I know better. Family does not always mean safety. Family can be the sharpest knife, the cruelest betrayal, the most unforgettable scar. And sometimes the only way to survive is to stop forgiving. When I look back at the path that led me here, I realize the story didn't start with me. It started with the generation before mine, with secrets buried so deep that when they surfaced, they cracked everything open like an earthquake. But I will tell this story in my own voice, because I was the one who carried the pain, the shame, and the rage until it consumed me. I am the middle daughter. Not the eldest, with the crown of expectation, not the youngest with the charm of innocence, just the one in between, the invisible one. My older sister Claire always had a way of taking up all the oxygen in the room, loud, glamorous, manipulative in ways that seemed subtle until you saw the wreckage she left behind. My younger brother Daniel was the baby, the golden child my mother swore would escape the poison of our home. And then there was me. I used to think of myself as the glue, the one who patched the cracks, kept everyone together, and stayed quiet so the others could shine. But glue can only hold so much before it dries up and breaks apart. I remember the first time betrayal lodged itself in my chest like a permanent shard. It was a summer evening, sticky and restless, the kind where cicadas scream louder than your own thoughts. I was 15. Claire had stolen my diary, the only place I dared to write the truth about how unsafe I felt at home, how much I resented my father's temper and my mother's silence. She read it out loud at a family barbecue, laughing as she dramatized my words, twisting my confessions into a performance. Everyone laughed with her except for me. My cheeks burned, my throat locked up, and I felt myself shrink to nothing. That was the first time I learned that secrets once exposed without your consent become weapons. Years later, I should have known that pattern would repeat itself, only with stakes far higher. When I was 25, I met Ethan. He was steady where my family was chaotic, kind where they were cruel. I remember thinking that maybe I could finally build a life free from the shadows of betrayal. Ethan saw me, the quiet one, the peacemaker, and he told me that being invisible didn't mean being worthless. I clung to that the way a drowning person clings to a rope. We married 2 years later in a ceremony small enough to keep my family from turning it into a battlefield. But of course, family finds its way in even when you try to shut the door. Claire came back into my life like a storm. She had been gone for years, traveling, chasing men with money, always resurfacing when she needed something. She walked into my house one evening, uninvited, her smile as sharp as glass. "Little sister," she said, "I heard you're living the dream now. A perfect husband, a cozy home. You always were the boring one, but I guess boring pays off." Her words were dressed as jokes, but I knew her well enough to hear the venom beneath. I should have thrown her out that night. I should have known she never returned without a motive. But Ethan, ever kind, insisted we give her a chance. "She's your sister," he said. "People change." But Claire didn't change. She only grew sharper. It started small. Her visits stretched longer. Her presence in my home grew heavier. She borrowed money, borrowed clothes, borrowed pieces of me until I felt hollow. And then the whispers began. Subtle at first, hidden in the way she leaned close to Ethan at the dinner table, her hand brushing his arm too casually. I told myself I was imagining it, that my past traumas were making me paranoid. But deep down I knew. Claire was circling something precious, and she had never once cared if she had to break me to get it. The night everything shattered is burned into my memory with merciless clarity. I was working late, exhausted, but relieved to have a steady job at a law office that gave me independence. I came home earlier than expected, my heart light with the thought of surprising Ethan. Instead, I found Claire in my living room, too close, her laughter soft and dangerous. Ethan pulled away when he saw me, his face pale with guilt. Claire didn't flinch. She just looked at me, her smile calm, as if she'd been waiting for me to witness it. The betrayal wasn't just in their closeness. It was in the way she wanted me to see it. To know she could still take everything from me even after all these years. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood there silent while my world caved in. That silence, I think, terrified Ethan more than any outburst could have. But Claire only smirked, her eyes glittering with triumph. That night, something inside me shifted. The glue that held me together cracked for the final time. For weeks, I lived like a ghost in my own body. I went through motions, answering questions at work, cooking meals, pretending to sleep beside Ethan, while his apologies filled the darkness. But inside, I was replaying everything: my childhood, the diary, the laughter, the years of being invisible. I realized that betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a cycle passed down like an inheritance, sharpened with every repetition. And if I didn't stop it, it would destroy me entirely. Revenge didn't come to me as fire. It came as ice, slow and deliberate. I began to collect pieces. Ethan's emails, Claire's messages, financial trails that showed how she had been using us both. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I let them think I was broken, fragile, retreating into silence again. But this time my silence was a weapon. One evening, while Ethan was in the shower, I opened his laptop. What I found was worse than I expected. Not just flirtations, not just confessions of doubt, but full declarations. He told Claire that he felt alive with her, that he was tired of my quietness, that I was too cautious, too invisible. My own husband had written the words I feared most, that I wasn't enough. I saved every message. Every word became a stone in the foundation of my resolve. When the day finally came to confront them, I didn't scream. I didn't fall apart. I waited until Claire showed up unannounced again, as I knew she would, and I handed her a folder. Inside were copies of everything: the emails, the receipts, even photographs I had quietly taken when they thought I wasn't watching. Her face paled for the first time. Ethan walked in mid-moment, his towel still around his waist, his expression collapsing as he realized what I had done. I remember standing there calm as stone as I told them both that the game was over. But this was only the beginning, because family secrets don't end with one betrayal. They unravel like threads, one pulling another, until the whole fabric tears apart. And what I discovered next would shatter not just my marriage, not just my relationship with my sister, but everything I thought I knew about my family's history. I thought exposing Ethan and Claire would give me relief, that once their betrayal was dragged out into the light, I could finally breathe. But instead it felt like the air grew heavier, pressing on my chest, until every breath burned. Watching their faces, their guilt, their panic, their silence, it didn't give me satisfaction. It only left me hollow. That night I told Ethan to leave. His protest spilled out in a rush, desperate words about mistakes and forgiveness, about how it was Claire who had manipulated him, about how he never meant to hurt me. But I'd heard it all before in different voices, through different mouths. It was the same chorus I'd lived with my whole life. I didn't mean to. It wasn't my fault. Can't you just forgive? So he left, and Claire disappeared too, at least for a while. But silence after betrayal is never empty, it echoes. My house was filled with the weight of their absence, shadows lingering in every corner. I couldn't sit at the dining table without hearing Claire's laughter. I couldn't sleep in my own bed without remembering Ethan's whispered apologies. So I retreated inward, convincing myself that if I stayed quiet enough, if I walled myself off, I would finally be safe. It was during this fragile period that the first letter came. The envelope was old, yellowed at the edges, the handwriting unmistakably my mother's. She had passed away 2 years before after a long battle with cancer, and yet here was her voice reaching me from the grave. Inside was a single sheet folded neatly, her words shaking but deliberate. My darling, if you are reading this, then there are truths you must know. Our family is built on secrets, and I fear those secrets will destroy you as they destroyed me. Your sister is not who she believes herself to be, and your brother's future depends on you uncovering the past. Forgive me, my child, but I was too weak to tell you while I was alive. I read the letter a dozen times, each word burrowing into me like a thorn. What did she mean Claire is not who she believes herself to be? What secrets had destroyed her? And why me? Why was it always my responsibility to carry the burden? I couldn't ask Ethan not anymore, and I couldn't confront Claire without proof she thrived on twisting weakness into leverage. So I turned to the only place I thought I might find answers, the attic of my childhood home, a place I hadn't set foot in since my mother's funeral. Daniel, my younger brother, still lived in that house. He had inherited it, though he barely maintained it. When I visited, he looked startled, as if he wasn't used to me stepping back into his world. He was different now, harder, his golden boy glow dimmed by years of disappointment. He avoided eye contact, but when I told him I wanted to go through Mom's things, he just nodded. "Do what you want," he muttered. "It's all just junk." But it wasn't junk. The attic was suffocating, filled with boxes of photographs, letters, and keepsakes from lives that no longer existed. I spent hours sifting through them, dust coating my fingers, tears blurring my vision as I stumbled across forgotten fragments of childhood. School drawings, birthday cards, newspaper clippings. But tucked away in a locked box, I almost missed. I found something that made my blood run cold. A birth certificate. Not mine, not Daniel's, Claire's. Except the name listed for mother wasn't my mother's at all. It was another woman's name, entirely one I had never heard before. And under father, the space was left blank. I remember sitting there clutching the paper, my hands trembling so badly I thought it might tear in half. My mother's words came back to me. "Your sister is not who she believes herself to be." Suddenly, it made sense. Claire wasn't my father's child. She wasn't even my mother's child. She was… what? A cousin. Someone else's abandoned baby. I searched further and found letters tied together with string, their paper brittle from age. They were love letters between my father and another woman, the same name listed on Claire's birth certificate. The letters were desperate, filled with longing, with promises of running away together. But something had stopped them. And somehow Claire had ended up in our house, raised as if she were my mother's own. The betrayal hit me like a second wave. All those years my mother had preached forgiveness, had kept silent while my father paraded his temper through the house. And all along she had been carrying the wound of raising another woman's child, keeping it a secret from us, hiding it, even as it poisoned her life. I wanted to hate her for it. For making me live under the shadow of lies, for binding me to a sister who was never really my sister. But I also understood her. Because I had done the same, I had stayed silent, swallowed pain-patched cracks, convinced myself that endurance was the same as strength. When I confronted Daniel with the birth certificate, he didn't look surprised. He just shrugged. "I figured something like that. She was always treated differently. Didn't you notice?" "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because saying things doesn't change anything," he said, his tone flat. "You of all people should know that." His words cut deeper than he knew. I left the house with the documents, my mind spinning. Suddenly, Claire's cruelty, her constant need to dominate, made sense. She must have felt it too, that invisible wall, the tension in my mother's gaze, the unspoken truth that she was never fully one of us. And if she had known, if she had discovered it before me, then maybe her betrayal wasn't just about Ethan. Maybe it was about survival, about proving she could take what she wanted because she had never truly been given a place. But knowing that didn't erase the scars she left on me. I kept the secret close for weeks, unsure of what to do. Ethan had tried to contact me during this time, leaving voicemails filled with apologies, begging for a second chance. I deleted them all without listening fully. But one night, as I sat alone with my mother's letter and the papers spread across the table, I realized something chilling. Claire might not even know the full truth. And if she didn't, then I was holding a weapon sharper than anything she had ever wielded against me. Revenge whispered in my ear again. This time not just against Ethan, but against Claire. Against the cycle of betrayal that had consumed us all. I imagined the look on her face when I showed her the certificate, when I ripped away her identity, the way she had ripped apart my marriage. But another voice inside me, quieter but insistent, asked if I was becoming just like her. If by exposing her I would be repeating the same cruelty she had inflicted on me when she read my diary out loud. I struggled with that choice night after night. My sleep was filled with restless dreams of my mother, her face pale and frail, whispering that she was sorry. And then fate forced my hand. Daniel called me one morning, his voice shaky. "You need to come home, it's about Claire." When I arrived, I found her in the kitchen of the old house, her eyes red, her hands clutching a half-empty bottle of whiskey. For once, she didn't look powerful. She looked broken. She glanced at me, her expression a mixture of defiance and desperation. "I know," she said simply. "I know the truth, about me, about her, about all of it." The room spun around me. If she knew, then everything was about to change. But what she told me next wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just that she was another woman's child. It wasn't just that she had always felt the weight of being different. No, there was another secret buried beneath it all, one that tied our family's betrayals into a knot so tangled I could barely breathe. And once I heard it, I realized the cycle of pain was far from over. Claire's hands trembled as she set the bottle on the table, her knuckles white as if she were holding onto it for balance. I had never seen her look so small, so stripped of the armor she always wore. She wasn't the radiant sister who mocked me, who laughed at my secrets, who stole my husband just to prove she could. In that moment, she looked like a lost child. "I went through Mom's things too," she said, her voice raw. "I found the letters, the birth certificate. I know I don't belong to this family, not by blood, not by right." Her eyes darted to mine, searching for some flicker of reaction. But I stood frozen, gripping the back of a chair to keep myself upright. "Claire," I started, but she cut me off. "You think I did what I did because I hate you, because I wanted to hurt you. But you don't understand." Her voice cracked, and tears slid down her cheeks, an image so alien to me that I almost couldn't process it. "I've spent my whole life knowing I wasn't one of you. I felt it in every look Mom gave me, in the way Dad's rage never seemed directed at me, the same way it was at you and Daniel. I wasn't his child, but I wasn't hers either. I was nothing. I thought if I could just prove I could take what you had, then maybe I wouldn't feel so empty." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her emptiness didn't excuse the wreckage she left in her wake. But my voice betrayed me, too tangled in grief and disbelief. "I found her journal," she whispered. "Not Mom's. The woman who gave birth to me. She wrote about how she wanted me, how she loved me. But then the entries just stop. She's gone. Dead, maybe. I don't even know. And I was dumped here to be someone else's problem. Do you know what it's like to live with that? To wonder every day why you weren't worth staying for?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. Because I did know in a way. Different circumstances, but the same ache, the question of why love had to feel like abandonment. Still, sympathy was tangled with rage. I thought of Ethan, of my marriage ripped apart, of the years she had stolen pieces of me without apology. "You could have come to me," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have told me all of this. Instead, you destroyed me. You took the one person I trusted most." She laughed bitterly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Do you really think he loved you? He pitied you, maybe. But love, no. He wanted someone who would fight him, challenge him, burn with him. And you were always too quiet, too careful. He told me himself that he married you because you were safe, because you would never leave." The words pierced me sharp and merciless. My knees nearly buckled and I had to grip the chair harder just to keep standing. She wasn't lying, I could see it in her eyes, the cruel honesty of someone who had nothing left to lose. "I may not belong here," Claire continued, her voice low and unsteady. "But neither do you. You've spent your whole life pretending to hold this family together. But the truth, we've all been falling apart since before we were even born." Daniel, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was cold, almost detached. "Stop blaming Mom for everything. She did what she thought was right. She tried to protect us." "Protect us?" Claire spat, turning on him. "She lied to us. She lied to me my entire life. She kept me here as a charity case, a constant reminder of his betrayal. You think that's protection? That's torture." The three of us stood there in that kitchen, our voices echoing off the cracked walls, the ghosts of our parents lingering between us. For a moment I thought this was it, that everything would collapse right there, that one of us would break so completely there'd be no turning back. But then Claire's tone shifted, softer, almost pleading. "I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to be this person. I don't even know who I am. Please help me." The words were foreign on her tongue. Claire asking for help. Claire admitting weakness. Part of me wanted to reach for her to pull her into the embrace I wish someone had given me when I was drowning. But another part of me, the larger part, remembered the sting of betrayal too clearly. I couldn't forget the sight of her with Ethan, the way she smirked when she knew she had broken me. And so I stayed still. That night I lay awake in my own bed, haunted by her confession. I replayed her words, her tears, her anger, her plea. And beneath it all, I felt the faint stirrings of something I hadn't expected: pity. Because for the first time I saw Claire not as my enemy, but as another victim of this tangled web of secrets. We were all trapped in it. Me, Daniel, even Ethan in his cowardice. We were children raised on lies, fed betrayal like it was nourishment, taught that silence was strength when really it was poison. But pity didn't erase the need for justice. I still had the documents, the proof of Claire's origins. I still had Ethan's emails, his confessions of love to her. I could expose them both, destroy them publicly, burn down everything they clung to. The thought of it filled me with a cold satisfaction. And yet, when I imagined doing it, something inside me recoiled. Would that make me any different from Claire, from Dad, from anyone who had chosen cruelty over truth? The conflict ate at me day after day. I withdrew from work, ignored calls from friends, lived in a haze of anger and doubt. Until one afternoon, a knock at my door pulled me back into reality. It was Ethan. He looked thinner, his face gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "Please," he said before I could even tell him to leave. "Just hear me out." Every fiber of me wanted to slam the door. But something in his voice, broken, desperate, stopped me. I let him in against my better judgment. He sat at the edge of the couch, his hands twisting together. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything. But I need you to know the truth." I laughed bitterly. "The truth? Do you even know what that means anymore?" He flinched, but pressed on. "Claire told me about her birth, about the letters, about everything, and it changes things. I don't love her, not really. I thought I did, but it was just chaos. She made me feel alive, but in the worst way. With you, I felt safe. With her, I felt reckless. And I chose wrong. God, I chose so wrong." His words should have meant something, but they felt empty, like ashes in my mouth. "You think admitting that erases what you did? You broke me, Ethan. You let her break me. You don't get to come back from that." He buried his face in his hands. "I know. But you also deserve to know what she's planning. She's not done, not by a long shot. She's angry at you, at your mother, at the whole world. And she wants revenge." The room tilted around me. "Venge on me." He nodded slowly. "She told me she's going to ruin you. She has proof, things about your past, your family, your job. She's going to expose everything. She wants to make you feel what she's felt her whole life." For a long time, I just sat there silent. The betrayal I thought had reached its peak was deepening again, twisting into something darker. Claire wasn't seeking peace despite her tears. She was preparing for war. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't just fighting for my pride or even for justice. I was fighting for survival. The days that followed Ethan's warning felt like walking across thin ice, every step cracking louder than the last. I went to work. I came home. I ate when I remembered, but inside I was waiting for the blow, for the storm Claire promised. And then it came. It started with whispers. Colleagues at the law office exchanging glances when I walked past, their voices dropping as if my presence was suddenly toxic. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself it was paranoia, but then an email arrived in my inbox. Anonymous, with one attachment. It was a copy of the diary I had kept as a teenager, the same one Claire once mocked me with at that barbecue. Only this time she hadn't just read it aloud to family. She had scanned it page by page and sent it out. Not just to my coworkers, but to clients, to friends, to anyone whose name she could dig up from my contacts. My private words, my fears about my father's rage, my mother's weakness, my desperate confessions about wanting to run away were now public property. The shame wrapped itself around my throat until I couldn't breathe. I wanted to crawl into myself, to disappear, to erase every trace of my existence. But Claire didn't stop there. Within days, another wave hit: photographs, some real, some doctored showing Ethan and me in distorted contexts. At work events, at family gatherings, twisted into narratives that painted me as unstable, obsessive, untrustworthy. She had written emails pretending to be me, sending cruel words to people I loved. She had taken my life and warped it into something grotesque. I remember standing in front of the bathroom mirror one night, staring at my reflection until the world blurred. My face looked foreign, as if I were staring at someone else, a stranger who had lost everything. And I asked myself, is this who I am now? A woman defined by betrayal, destroyed by secrets, hollowed out by revenge. But even as despair swallowed me, a flicker of something else ignited, rage. Claire wanted to break me, but she didn't realize something crucial. I had already been broken. I had already lived through the humiliation, the silence, the invisibility. She was dragging me back into that pit, but what she didn't understand was that I had learned how to survive there. I began to fight back. Not loudly, not the way she did, but quietly, methodically. I documented everything she had done, the emails, the forged messages, the leaked diary, the doctored photos. I built a case against her the way I built cases at work, carefully, relentlessly, with precision. Every piece of evidence became a weapon I stored away, waiting for the right moment. Ethan offered to help, but I pushed him away. He had chosen his side once. I didn't trust him not to falter again. This battle was mine alone. Then came the night when the storm and the silence collided. Daniel called me, his voice shaking. "She's here," he said. "She's tearing the house apart. You need to come." By the time I arrived, the front door was hanging open, the lights flickering like a scene out of some haunted dream. Claire was inside, pacing the living room, her hair wild, her eyes bloodshot. Boxes lay overturned, photographs scattered across the floor. She had torn through everything, searching, clawing at the past as if it could give her answers. When she saw me, she froze, and then she laughed. "You think you're so strong, don't you?" she said, her voice sharp with hysteria. "You think you're better than me just because you were the real daughter, because you got the marriage, the job, the stability. Look at you now. Everyone knows who you really are. You're nothing." Her words hit me like knives, but this time I didn't flinch. I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "You want to know the truth, Claire. You've been nothing to me for years. Not because of who your mother was, not because of the lies we were raised on, but because you chose cruelty. You chose destruction, and I won't let you drag me down with you." She lunged at me, then shoving me backward, her nails catching on my arm. Daniel rushed between us, trying to hold her back, but she thrashed, screaming, her voice breaking into sobs. "I never asked to be here. I never asked to be her mistake. And now it's all I am." Her scream echoed through the house, raw and guttural, a sound that came not just from her throat, but from years of buried rage. For the first time, I saw the child inside her, the girl who had grown up in the same house as me, but with a different weight on her shoulders. The girl who had never known who she really was. And in that moment, I felt torn in two. Half of me wanted to embrace her, to tell her she wasn't alone, that I understood. But the other half, the half scarred by every betrayal, wanted to end it, to expose her, to let the world see the monster she had become. Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts. "Enough, both of you." He pushed Claire back, his chest heaving, his eyes wet. "Do you hear yourselves? This isn't about Mom or Dad or Ethan. This is about us. And if we don't stop, we're going to destroy what little is left." But Claire wasn't listening. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, sobbing. "I don't know who I am," she whispered. "I don't know where I belong. I don't know how to stop." The sight of her there shattered should have softened me, but all I felt was exhaustion. My whole life had been spent carrying the weight of other people's mistakes. My father's rage, my mother's silence, my husband's betrayal, my sister's cruelty. And now I was supposed to carry her too. No, not anymore. I pulled the folder from my bag and dropped it on the floor in front of her. The birth certificate, the letters, the evidence of every lie we had been forced to live with. "Here," I said, "this is the truth you've been tearing yourself apart to find. Take it. It's yours." She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fear and fury. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment, my heart pounding. "What I should have done a long time ago," I said. And then I turned and walked out, leaving her with the truth she had spent her life chasing, the truth that had poisoned us all. As I stepped into the night, the air cold and sharp against my skin, I realized that the real climax wasn't about destroying Claire. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about release, about choosing not to carry the weight of secrets that weren't mine anymore. But the story wasn't over, because the next morning I woke to a phone call that would change everything again. Claire was gone. The phone call came at dawn, my phone vibrating violently against the nightstand, tearing me from a restless sleep. I saw Daniel's name flashing on the screen, and before I even answered, I knew something was wrong. His voice was barely audible, hoarse and broken. "She's gone," he whispered. "Claire's gone." My chest tightened. "What do you mean gone?" "She left the house last night after you left. She took the folder, the letters, everything. I thought she was just cooling off, but they found her car this morning. At the bridge." His voice cracked. "They think she jumped." The silence on the line was deafening. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear through my ribs. Images of Claire flooded my mind, her mocking smile, her sharp laughter, her tear-streaked face just hours before. I wanted to deny it, to believe it wasn't real, but the truth pressed in like a suffocating weight. Claire was gone. I dropped the phone and sank to the floor, the world spinning around me. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I pressed my palms to my face as if I could block out the reality with sheer force. But her voice lingered in my ears. "I don't know who I am. I don't know how to stop." She hadn't stopped. The days that followed blurred together in shades of gray. The news spread quickly, another tragedy, another life lost to despair. People whispered her name, painted her as a broken woman, a cautionary tale. But for me, it wasn't just news. It was blood. It was history. It was the sister who had ruined me, and yet a sister I could not stop mourning. The guilt was relentless. I replayed that night in the house over and over, the moment I dropped the folder at her feet, the way I turned my back and walked away, the look in her eyes, wide and pleading as she asked what I would do, and my answer cold, final, unforgiving. Had I pushed her to the edge? Had my silence been the final straw that tipped her into the abyss? I told myself she had been unraveling long before that night, that her pain was too vast for me to heal, that her choices were her own. But in the quiet hours when the house was still and the shadows pressed close, I couldn't shake the image of her standing on that bridge, clutching the truth that had destroyed her, the truth I had delivered. Daniel tried to comfort me, though he was drowning in his own grief. "This isn't your fault," he said over and over. "She was broken long before. You didn't make her this way." But I couldn't believe him, because deep down I knew that brokenness runs in blood, that we all carried the same cracks passed down from our parents etched into our childhood. And maybe Claire simply shattered first. Ethan came to the funeral, though I didn't want him there. He stood at the back, his face pale, his eyes downcast. I avoided him, unable to stomach the sight of the man who had chosen her over me, who had tangled himself in our family's poison and deepened the wound. When he tried to approach me afterward, I turned away. I had no forgiveness left to give him. Standing over Claire's grave, the autumn wind biting at my skin, I felt a hollowness I couldn't name. I had dreamed of this moment before, not her death, but her downfall, her absence, a world where she couldn't hurt me anymore. But standing there staring at the freshly turned earth, I realized that victory tasted like ashes. There was no satisfaction, no relief, only sorrow. And yet buried within that sorrow, a fragile clarity emerged. Claire had lived her life defined by lies, by secrets, by the absence of belonging. She had lashed out, taken, destroyed, because it was the only way she knew to prove she existed. I had lived my life differently, but not so differently. I had stayed quiet, endured patched cracks, believing that silence was safer than confrontation. Both of us had been trapped just in opposite cages. Her death was a tragedy, but it was also a mirror, a warning. If I didn't break free from this cycle of silence, of betrayal, of revenge, I might end up just as lost as she was. So I began again, slowly, painfully, but deliberately. I left the law office that had whispered behind my back, walking away from the shame she had unleashed on me. I sold the house where Ethan and I had built our fragile, broken marriage. I packed boxes of memories, leaving behind anything that carried too much weight. And I started to write, not in secret diaries to be mocked, but openly, honestly pouring my story into words that I refused to hide. I wrote about my father's rage, my mother's silence, my sister's cruelty, her pain, her end. I wrote about Ethan's betrayal, about my own invisibility, about the years I had spent trying to hold together what was already fractured. And through writing, I began to understand. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not pretending wounds don't exist. Forgiveness is choosing not to carry the knife that cut you, to set it down even when your hands still bleed. I couldn't save Claire, but I could save myself. And maybe in telling the story, I could save someone else, someone sitting in silence, someone drowning in betrayal, someone wondering if their pain made them worthless. Because I know now that silence is not strength. Truth is. And even if the truth hurts, even if it shatters the illusion of family, it is the only path to freedom. As I stand here now, years later, I still carry the echoes of my sister's laughter, her cruelty, her pain. I carry the memory of the night I turned my back and the morning I learned she was gone. That will never leave me. But I also carry the lesson her life gave me, the final gift she didn't know she was giving. That we are not defined by the lies we inherit. We are defined by the choices we make to rise beyond them. So I choose truth. I choose release. I choose to break the cycle. And if you are listening to me, if you have followed my story to this point, I want you to take something with you. Whatever betrayal you've endured, whatever secret has poisoned your life, whatever scars you carry, you are not invisible, you are not worthless, and you are not alone. If my story has touched you, if you see pieces of yourself in these words, I ask you to share it. Not for me, but for the countless others who need to hear that pain does not have to be the end. Like this video, leave a comment with your own story, subscribe if you want to walk this journey with me. Let's build a place where truth is stronger than silence, where scars are not shame, and where even betrayal can lead to healing. Because in the end, that is what my sister's life and death taught me, that even in the darkest corners of home, light can still be found.